it was like someone had opened the floodgates and we got whirlpools and gushes of water, masses of water coming all around the boat, so much so that the boat was actually spinning 360 degrees.
Despite it being a pretty exposed anchorage last night and we were a bit worried about rolling and not sleeping well, we both had a really good night's sleep and woke up thoroughly refreshed this morning. So today we're going to Banggai. It's a great name if you're from Birmingham. Banggai. It's a fairly large town in this group of islands south of where we were last night. We don't really have too much to do, so we're not worried about where we anchor. As long as we can just get the anchor down safely somewhere, we just need somewhere to stop tonight before we continue south and make the best use of the winds. But getting here is quite interesting. The channel is very challenging. We've had 2.5 up to 3 knots of current with us, which is great. As long as it stays that way, we'll be in Banggai in no time whatsoever. Lovely morning and clear blue skies, a nice change from all the crap we had yesterday when it just rained and was grey all day, like being back in the UK. So yeah, quite interested to see how long this is going to last. We've got a weird tide as well. It's one of those ones that only peaks very, very slightly. There's a small trough, then there's another peak 5 hours later, then a massive reduction, tide going out, because it's a very big spring tide right now at the moment. I probably didn't describe that very well. I'm sure Jamie will do a much better job.
Well, we just went over a current line, and that current is running down the side of this island here, because at one point we had 2.8 knots of current with us, and which is great, of course, but if the tide had turned and that current had switched, 2.8 knots of current would have had us motoring at probably less than a knot. A fishing hotspot here, just been through about 15 boats, all in close proximity to each other, and right by a current line as well. So Esper was doing this under autopilot while going through all of these boats. So I took manual control and had Liz up at the front just to keep an eye on things in the water. There's quite a few logs and things. But anyway, we were close enough that Liz was actually able to have sort of conversations with these guys. All friendly. They're all line fishing, so they've all got a single line, presumably with a number of hooks on them. The lines go straight down and you see them just sitting at the front of their canoe just doing this. We have read that Banggai has been described by one cruiser as a dirty town, although that was many years ago. They also said it's quite difficult to take the dinghy ashore, and since we got diesel recently and provisioning, we don't really have a need to go to a town for the moment. So what we're thinking is, rather than taking the detour to get to Banggai, there's a nice little island just here, hopefully with internet connection to keep an eye on the weather. It's part of a reef system, so there should be some shallow patches, just checking the depth now. And because the next place we want to go to is just a little bit too far to do today, so we always intended to spend a few days here anyway, just to keep an eye on the weather and to find a suitable window. I had a cursory glance at the weather this morning, and there does actually seem to be one to do the next big jump, which after this anchorage is around about 80 miles, is the shortest distance. And I suspect that we're probably just going to have to sail with whatever winds we have and end up wherever we end up. But at least here we can stay outside of the busy town, all the noise and the hustle and bustle and the dirt and the crap, by a beautiful little island. And yeah, just rest for a little bit. Well, this is a rather idyllic little spot, isn't it? Assuming the weather doesn't blow up. It's not forecast to do, but obviously we get those odd squalls. But there's a channel in between these two islands. Liz keeps saying, just forget about it, doesn't matter, because it's quite narrow. And I'm saying, well, you just don't know, some of the local ferries could use it as a cut through. But anyway, point is, we've got a reef that comes all the way out across here. So even if that cloud formation there was to develop and blow straight up, which I doubt it will, there is some protection here. And as you can see, it's pretty flat at the moment. So got a little bit of current pushing us, so I don't even have to put the boat into a stern to set the anchor. It should just set itself. Plus there's a lot of shit in the water. You need to ignore that. Don't fancy putting the boat into gear at the moment. It didn't take long for the conditions to change here. Squall coming in, no protection from the reef, and yeah, white horses. So just keep an eye on the anchor basically. It's blowing in pretty hard as well. Here comes the rain. You can just see it. It's approaching us fast. Batten down the hatches. Surprisingly, as that rain hit, there was an intense smell of earth. You know the smell you get when the pavements get soaking from hot rain? You get that earthy smell. I can smell it here, even though we're on the boat in the water. And I guess that's all coming off Banggai Island over there, which is where the rain hit first. They do say that the rain flattens the water, so that's one good thing, I suppose. At the moment, anchor seems okay. Funnily enough, when we set the anchor, we were pointing in the other direction, and I think I said to camera there was enough current that it could set itself, but we have now switched around, so I'm just keeping an eye on that. Marking on the app that I use, the satellite app, our position sort of every 5 minutes. If it changes, I'll put a little waypoint on it just to see if there's any great big variation in how we're moving around. It's next morning and we've decided just to nip across the bay to actually anchor outside the town of Banggai for a couple of reasons. Yesterday at a certain tide, and it was around about mid-tide, it was like someone had opened the floodgates and we got whirlpools and gushes of water, masses of water coming all around the boat, so much so that the boat was actually spinning 360 degrees. I've never seen anything like this before, and it didn't last the whole tide either. It literally lasted 15-20 minutes and then it would calm down. You could hear these ripples approaching, and anyway, although it was a nice spot, it was just, I don't know, it just had me on edge a little bit because we were anchored between two reefs. And so this morning we just thought we'd just nip over to the town. We're not going to go into town, but just anchor just outside of it. A, to get outside of those currents. B, because there could be some weather coming up. And C, to get some decent internet connection for a decent weather forecast. So also, where we end up anchoring actually gets us just half a mile closer to our next destination. So I thought we'd just weigh anchor and just head over there for the night. You may have noticed it's a little bit bouncy here, and that is because we anchored again. We moved away from that great little spot over there because it's Friday. All the fishing boats came in, and I poked my head out to find there were two fishing boats right next to us, tied up next to each other. And I said to Liz, they are going to drag. So we moved back out into the bay, so we don't have so much protection when the tide changes. There's a little bit of swell here, but it's perfectly fine. Good anchorage with loads of boats behind us, and sure enough, those two boats that I said were going to drag did drag. Morning. We have a 25-mile trip today. We've got one of those tides that's sort of quite light for two tides and then it drops again. Main concern are currents here. It was 1.5 when we left the anchorage in our favour. It's now dropped down to 1. I can now see we're going through some eddies now. Currents dropped down to 0.7, so it'll be interesting to see what happens as we leave here. What I'm hoping is that the direction we're taking is going to get us out of these currents, but I just don't know, so we'll just have to see what happens. But no sooner did I say that, went through those eddies and we've got current against us now. This is only 0.3 knots, but actually our speed has dropped down to 3.5, which is it's going to be a long bloody day at this rate.
Well, it was an early start this morning to go about 25 miles south to the next anchorage before we do the bigger leap further south. This morning I was awake at 3:30 listening to somebody playing a guitar and a whole load of people singing in town. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I read, and then I was just falling off, and the mosque started at about 4:20, and that went on until Jamie's alarm went off. So I haven't had a great deal of sleep, but it's a glorious day today. Beautiful views all around us and not much wind, but what's new there. But we're doing what we can. We've got a couple of sails out and the motor on.
There's a bit of change of plan. We were aiming to head over there, but Liz has managed to successfully schedule next week's video. Of course, by the time you see this, it will be a few months ahead, but never let it be said that Liz does not try her damnedest to make sure that we get our videos up on time. Took the whole night to upload it at the last anchorage. She's had some decent connection to schedule it all. It's quite an involved process, and we knew that there was connection over at that island over there. However, it puts us at a slightly more acute angle for the predicted winds and a little bit further back. So we've decided, because she's done all this, still with connection where we are now, we're going to head to an atoll. And this atoll is just a little bit closer, it's 10 miles closer to our next destination after the big jump across the bay. And also the angle is slightly better as well for any wind that we are due to get. So we've changed course and we're now heading towards this atoll. So we've just done some last minute passage planning, because obviously lots of reefs, but it's a horseshoe shaped reef. There's a couple of little islands on it as well. So let's see what it looks like when we get there.
Now this was more like it. Stunning azure seas surrounding jewel-like islands with white sand beaches, small fishing boats chug-a-lugging past and friendly fishermen calling out a greeting. It was going to be exactly what we'd hoped for in the long journey south across the remotest parts of Sulawesi. But when you're a sailor, it never quite works out the way you expect.
Okay, so supposedly we were going to get a lie-in today, because we weren't going to leave until 12, because we've done our calculations and we worked out that even if we did 3 knots, it's going to take us day and a night to get to our next anchorage. So we just have to assume that we might be motoring, although we're hoping for some wind. But anyway, this anchorage was supposed to be good protection from the southerlies, which it was, but at 4 in the morning we got woken up by a northerly swell, which basically meant it came from there where there's no protection at all. A little bit bouncy, but yeah, it blew through, and you can see it's cleared up now, but we do know that there is more weather sort of coming up, so we're probably going to expect a few squalls as we make our way down. And yeah, I think it's 88 miles to our next destination, and yeah, we'll start off by motoring, and then, well, we'll see what happens. We have a few contingency anchorages as well, just in case we don't make the one we're aiming for, which is due south from here. So we've got a few up the coast, just in case we sort of get blown off course.
The seas continued to build. We're getting 2 to 3 metres, I'd say, easily, and the wind was 30.